What's up guys, Muley Moogie here, and a long overdue video coming your way. I'm gonna break down my opinions on the best leaders from One Piece trading card game set 1, Romance Dawn. Of course, including the starter cards as well. So, you'll see here I have an S and an S minus tier, an A tier, B tier, and a C tier. One of the great things about One Piece's initial set is that pretty much the majority of all leaders are competitive. There's only a few standouts that really can't win a game, and some of their problems is also just like being the same color as a much better deck, so why would you ever play that one? Anyway, let's just get into it right away. My standalone pick and a leader I'll probably be going back and forth talking about when I mentioned the other leaders. The standalone in S tier, in my opinion, is Eustace Kid. He is just the best deck in the format, the most consistent, the most play into any of the other leaders, the least downside. You know, he has 8 cost Kid, which can be both aggressive and defensive, makes it really hard for red decks to crack through, and probably blue decks as well, while also being able to end the game in about like 1 to 2 turns after you've established him. And his leader effect is just the most broken part about him. You essentially always have access to a rush character for 3 if you're willing to, you know, discard the card, and he can also control the game so early and end the game so quickly because of his leader effect, especially in certain matchups. We'll talk more about him most likely when we discuss other leaders, but in my opinion, just the strongest leader in the format right now. So next in the S minus tier, I have Kaido, Law, and Doflamingo. These are all, in my opinion, the characters that can go toe-to-toe with Kid and also with any other deck. They can beat any matchup in the set, which is a really strong trait to have. It means that they can win a tournament at any time. They just have to draw well. The reason these are a tier below Kid and not by much, you see just S to S minus, is just because they have much higher variance. Kaido obviously a lot weaker if he doesn't draw Onigashima. When he does draw it, might even be stronger than Kid, but that lack of consistency makes me not want to rate him as highly. The same thing with Law. Law does run the possibility of bricking on both searchers or just having counters in hand. Sometimes you flood your hand with too many cards with no counter, or just not drawing, you know, the right curve, the right consistency that you want. And something that you can't even control is like if your opponent, let's say they're playing Kid or Kaido or another green deck, and they're resting and killing your board, not letting you accumulate your card advantage or set up your leader effect. It just powers down really quickly. That being said, definitely the strongest leader effect in the game. It's extremely broken. The cards that he can take advantage of and protect as well with his leader ability, super strong, but just can't match that consistency that Kid has, and that's why I have him in the S minus tier. And lastly, Doflamingo, the easiest and most unfair of all the leader effects. Definitely, if there were a wider variety of 7 warlords with like different skills and abilities, he'd be a lot stronger. The only thing that balances him out is that his deck is very fair in the late game, because the cards you're playing are, because you want to activate and hit your leader ability so often, you're playing a bunch of 4 cost 5k characters, which is really good early game, especially early game, since you're playing them for 1 lower and not from your hand. It's fine mid game because it's on par of what everyone else is doing, but late game your deck is just filled with much weaker cards. When at 7, 8, 9, 10 Dawn, Kid is playing 7 cost Kid, 8 cost Kid, Basil Hawkins, things like that, you're still playing warlords at 4, and they're great cards, good blockers. Boa Hancock's exceptional card. Gecko Mordia, broken card, but just the the return on Dawn late game is not that powerful. You can offset it with Dracul Mihawk, one of the most powerful cards in the game, but being forced to build your decks so strictly, you'll notice like all the top performing Dofi decks really don't have too many variants. Like 40 of the 50 cards are always going to be the same. It definitely makes him just a little bit weaker, and also just like Kaido and Law, a little prone to breaking. Your opponents can sometimes see no warlords or see just Marshall D Teach, and like Law unfortunately he lacks a bit of that consistency, keeps him out of the S tier, but an extremely powerful deck. He's definitely, like I said, doing the most unfair thing earliest as far as his leader effect, but the later the game goes, the less broken it is, because what you're cheating in is not it's not backbreaking. But also, again, like I said, with any of these S tier decks, any of them can beat any deck and can win a tournament, which also goes to say for the next two that I have, or the next three that I have. So in the A tier, I have Luffy and Zoro, as well as Blue Purple Crocodile. Blue Purple Crocodile is definitely the weakest of any of these, and its biggest issue is that it's such a strong deck, but it loses to kids so dramatically, and also doesn't do too well into Kaido or these red decks. Sometimes when it draws well, it's just so close to impossible to beat it. Never low on cards, extremely high on counter, so hard to deal damage to it. Its 4 life doesn't even seem like an issue, which, by the way, I forgot to mention is one of Law and Blue Purple Crocodile's issues, being at 4 life. But it doesn't always draw that well. It's playing a lot weaker cards on the lower curve to try and get to the late game, and by then it might be too late. And like I said, it can lose to any of these other decks drawing well, but it's an extremely powerful deck. I struggle to rank it with any of the other leaders, which is why I put it at A. But definitely the hardest to do well with, and sometimes still that won't be enough, like even if you're playing exceptionally well. Zoro and Luffy, just the best red strategies in the game. Obviously, like the only mono red strategies anyway, but they're both exceptional. Luffy's great at playing the late game because of his leader effect. Zoro is extremely aggressive and can really punish bad draws. That's like his biggest strength, is that you can build the deck to be so consistently aggressive and efficient that when Doflamingo, Law, Kaido, or Kid stumble just in the slightest in their draw, Zoro can absolutely ram through them. I mean, he can do that with against any leader, but versus the top tier, these decks can also win tournaments. I've seen it happen at my locals, and we've seen him win treasure cups at this point, especially Luffy. Luffy really does break the game. The playing with the extra Dawn just always is extremely relevant. He can hit those sweet spot numbers, 7k, 9k, or just 2 above. When you're attacking characters, he can do it so much more efficiently, and actually Zoro can too, since the effect he has requires you to attach less Dawn to your characters. So definitely extremely powerful. Their biggest upside is the ability to punish inconsistent or just lackluster draws. Even just the slightest stumble of like, oh, I drew too many cards with no counter, can really get punished by red. Me and my friends have seen red decks attack for 6k with their leader and win because the opponent just had no counter in hand. They had 1 counter in hand, and it's not enough even with 6 cards in hand. So red deck is the most likely to do this, and that's what makes them so powerful. Luffy's definitely my favorite Aura Zoro just because of its ability to play the late game. Especially recently, we've been seeing cards like Ben Beckman and Shanks do a lot of work. Those cards are extremely hard to deal with. I'm realizing now, late into the game, that this meta is pretty much going to be revolved around these high cost, high power creatures or characters, I'm sorry, that are extremely difficult to attack into, because if you do and fail to remove them, it's pretty much going to be a loss for you. So cards like Ben Beckman and Shanks, cards like Mihawk, the 2 Kaidos, the 10 cost, the 10k and the 12k Kaido, and of course 8 cost Kid. All of these represent such extreme brutal threats that if you try and swing into them with anything but, you know, the cards I just mentioned, and you fail, your turn's pretty much wasted and the game's likely over. Anyway, not too in depth. I think everyone knows the power of all of the red leaders. They're just very aggressive, and Luffy can play that late game really well. Of course, Zoro can too. They both have Diablo Jambe and the Rush Luffy that can just absolutely steal games, another one of their strengths. So in the B tier, I would have to say Kinemon is the best of any of the B tiers, followed probably by Blurple Kaido, then Red Green Luffy, and then Crocodile. Crocodile, honestly, not that bad. Blue Crocodile. It's just, it doesn't make a lot of sense to be playing a leader, especially a controlling leader, without access to the purple cards. At least in the current set that we have, you know, with you have access to 3 2k counters, and only one of them is really playable. That's one of the things I love about the hybrid cards, is having access to more 2k counters that are also okay to slam down. That's what makes Law and Blue Purple Crocodile so powerful, and actually purple in general, because they just got a lot of 2k counters at the start. Red too, actually. Red has access to so many 2k counters. It really allows for versatile deck building. And its leader effect is just not that impactful. I can actually imagine a sort of aggressive style Crocodile where you're bouncing away their blockers, but bouncing is just not that good in the current meta. Of course, by bouncing I mean returning to hand, because most things will either have rush or on play effects, especially the things that Crocodile can hit, and it's just not extremely relevant. And the -4 Dawn is not free, you know, you're not in purple, so it takes 2 turns to recoup that. Red Green Luffy, the card with some of the most potential, and it just can't get there in this set, and maybe never will. It's his later effect is just a little too expensive to do some of the most like beautiful combos with, and being at 4 life and having like all your best cards, at least I found when you're brewing him, have no counter, so you just run the risk of just having 7 cards in hand. 4 of them don't have counter, and yes, you'd be set up to, you know, OTK your opponent next turn, but they're just gonna kill you before, because you're at 4 life, and it's really hard to play a leader that has an effect that wants to be aggressive, but you need to facilitate it with a bunch of blockers like Chopper and Beige or Killer, just to get to the late game where you can do your super sick combos. But then if you're doing that, you have less counter in your deck, and if you're doing that, the 4 life is an extreme detriment, unlike Law. So he just has this really unfortunate, you know, leader effect that's like extremely powerful. It's the potential's all there. It's just the way the deck building has to go to see it come to fruition, just super unlikely. Of course, you can steal games. I've seen people post lists where they went undefeated at, you know, a local 4-0, 5-0 or something, but I just definitely wouldn't recommend it. He is more of a glass cannon than any other card on this list. So Blue Purple Crocodile, an extremely, in my opinion, underutilized leader. I think it has so many possibilities and so much potential. I've been tampering around with different lists. Its leader effect is really actually quite strong. I wonder if there's a way to make it you know, reach its full potential that we haven't seen yet, but I'm just going to trust the pros and think that it's not possible. I think, again, the 4 life is a huge cost, unlike Law, especially because Law has access to 8 cost Kid if you want to make the 4 life not as relevant. But when you're playing Kaido and Luffy and Blue Purple Crocodile, the 4 life really is a detriment. not only that, it's just like if you're playing the most powerful blue and purple cards, they likely don't have counter, making you even more susceptible to losing life. You're already starting one down. And it's just a really hard composition to build. You don't really know what your game plan is. Do you want to kill things early to ramp? But if you're killing things early to ramp, does that mean you're playing Who's Who, which not only doesn't have counter, but is negative Adon anyway, so you're not really ramping? It's really hard to judge. But no matter what, even the best build of it will always be inconsistent, so that's why he's in B tier. Still a very powerful leader effect. A lot of potential. And lastly, in the B tier, at the highest rank, Odin. Odin is just this extremely powerful leader that is offset by a couple different things. One, he's mono green, which shares the color with the best leader in the format. So if you're playing Odin, you must just really love Samurai or must really love Wano, because Kid is just worlds better, unfortunately. Two, his leader effect, extremely powerful, but you have to go down a card in order to use it. You have to trash a Land of Wano card. It's definitely not free. It can allow for some cool plays and everything, but being down in cards in this game as of now is just not a feasible strategy. So there will be some turns when your leader just doesn't have an ability, kind of like Red Green Luffy actually, and that's a big weakness for them. And then lastly, just like having to be heavier on these Land of Wano cards in order to pull off his biggest strengths, which is like Odin actually has the possibility of like one turn killing from 4 to 5 life, with a combination of Kinemons and Okikus and just powerful Land of Wano cards, but it'll almost rarely happen if your opponent's playing well. And we can see in Kid deck building that the Land of Wano cards are just not as strong as the Supernovas that Kid is playing, and the less Land of Wano cards you're playing, the worse his leader effect is, the worse his combination, his combo game is, as far as like triggering Kinemons over and over. So pretty unfortunate. So that being said, still a powerful deck. If he's your favorite character, your favorite leader, you can definitely win games, you can definitely win tournaments with him. Super strong, especially out of the B tiers, but it does require a lot of sacrifice. And lastly, a deck I really can't speak too much on because I basically never see it played, but I think the fact that I never see it played is a testament to how bad it is. King, actually I'm just realizing that Yuta isn't on this thing. I would put Yuta at the end of B tier as well. She's better than King and actually has some potential. We've seen the rise of the power of vanillas that are, +2 for the cost that you pay for them in Luffy, so why can't Yuta be good? Anyway, King, just a horrible leader. It's one of those cards where I read it and I think that has potential, then I read it again and it gets worse. It's like those images you look at and they just keep getting worse and worse the more you look at them. The fact that its effect is only on your turn, horrible. If it was gonna have an effect like that, you wish you could at least do it on your opponent's turn. The fact that most of the good purple cards will make you minus Dawn to turn off the leader ability, absolutely horrible. It's just, I don't want to waste too much time talking about it. It's not good. If you play it for fun, by all means try and make it work, especially low stakes tournaments, at your locals or anything like that, but it is not a good leader and I'm not gonna say much more about it. But hopefully King gets better someday. That effect maybe might be relevant someday, but for now, just not good. So anyway guys, that's gonna do it for my tier list. Let me know if you agree, other points that I might have missed, or what ways you would contest some of the placings that I have. Maybe you think that Luffy and Zoro should be in the S tier, the S- tier. I could definitely see that. There's a world where Luffy and Zoro should definitely be on the same level as everyone else. But with that being said, thank you so much for watching. Appreciate it. Like and subscribe, and hope to bring you more content soon. Peace.